Yeah, I'm seeing a slowed down trickle of people joining us. And of course, if people join us late, that's not a problem. So I think I will go ahead and start our introductions. So I'm Erin Valentine. I am a stage management counselor on Equity Council, and I'm also the secretary treasurer. I'm really excited to be here with you for this evening's workshop. Room agreements have become really, really important in our profession. They allow us to set boundaries, establish values, and create a safe workspace, addressing concerns before they grow into problems. We have a fantastic team of facilitators to introduce. Before we begin, I'd like to read a land acknowledgement as well as Equity's statement of affirmation. So I myself am speaking to you today from the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, colonially known now as Vancouver. I know we have attendees from across Turtle Island, so I encourage you to take a moment just to think about the Indigenous occupants and the stewards of the land that you are now on. And Equity's statement of affirmation. Equity embraces an open and inclusive environment and encourages respectful behavior that affirms the dignity of all individuals. Equity further recognizes our shared responsibility for vigilance in creating and maintaining this environment. Equity recognizes a shared history with Indigenous First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in Canada. And in honor of those who have gone before us, Equity commits to working towards understanding and actionable practices of reconciliation. So welcome everybody to the 7th in a series of workshops and seminars that Equity is proud to bring you on topics of great importance to members of Equity and to the industry at large. Equity gratefully acknowledges the Government of Canada for the funding of these programs through the Department of Canadian Heritage as a part of the Canada Performing Arts Workers Resilience Fund. After the workshop, we'll be sending all of you attendees a link to complete a brief survey. We want your feedback on these workshops and your guidance as we plan future ones. If you have a question during this workshop, I'd encourage you to use the raise hand option or put your question in the chat. We have switched to meeting mode. So people, attendees, you are all able to turn on your own mics, which means that we'd ask you to be mindful to stay muted unless you have something to say or are asking a question. There are also some common questions that may come up built into the presentation. So now I would like to go ahead and introduce our panelists and moderator for this session. We've got Amelia Sargisson, a bilingual theater artist and the co-creator of ARCS. Inspired by Carrie Fisher's call to take your broken heart and make it into art, she began collaborating in 2020 with Alexis, Dave, Richard, and Tahirih on what they would eventually make into ARCS. The goal was to design a program that would empower artists with tools to healthily navigate the vulnerabilities of the job, as well as build creative spaces where authenticity, compassion, and radical curiosity can thrive. Today, she continues to work with the team to make the program as robust and practical as it can be, and loves facilitating ARCs in both professional and academic settings. Recent acting credits include Red Velvet at Crow's Theatre and Hamlet 911 at Stratford. She's performed in English and French on stages across the country, from North End to Halifax, as well as in the States and as far as Japan. TV credits include C on Apple TV, Murdoch Mysteries on CBC. Amelia has narrated multiple audiobooks for Penguin Random House, not Penguin Rabbit House, Penguin Random House.
All right, Erin, I lost you at Murdoch Mysteries. So
alrighty.
I need you to go back. Thank you.
Good, because I said things about penguins and rabbits. Amelia, TV credits including C and Murdoch Mysteries, and she has narrated multiple audiobooks for Penguin Random House. In addition to ARCS, she co-created the TIFT two-way mentorship program, which is currently in its second nationwide iteration, thanks to support from the CPAWRF. Amelia is working on a solo show called For Shame, and a play which she co-wrote with Nisha Ahuja. 30 People Watching is published in Review, an anthology of plays committed to social justice. So that is Amelia. Tahirih Vejdani is the Toronto-based artist of Persian and South Asian heritage. Her artistic practice includes working as an actor, singer, vocal instructor, music director, arts administrator, and ARCS facilitator. Tahirih holds a Bachelor of Music from the University of Regina with a double major in vocal performance and music history. She is pursuing a master's in vocal pedagogy through the University of Wales, Trinity St. David. Tahirih is a vocal instructor at Sheridan's Bachelor of Musical Theatre program, and currently is a resident artist with Talk is Free Theatre in the Artist BIG program, Developing Arcs, and the Two-Way Mentorship program. Derek Kwan is an actor, singer, and theater creator working at the intersection of theater, music, and movement in a number of forms, including opera, clown, and puppetry. His performing career has taken him across Canada and the globe, from London, England, to performances in Czech Republic, Mexico, Japan, Thailand, Taiwan, and China. Derek was nominated for 3 Dora Mavor Moore Awards for his work in theater and received the Toronto Theatre Critics Award for Best Supporting Actor in a Musical for his role in Mr. She and His Lover. Derek is passionate about therapeutic clowning, as well as clown, puppet, and mask in all contexts. He is the artistic director of Common Boots Theatre and interim co-executive director of Red Nose Remedy. And we have Giovanni Spina. He has participated in ARCS as a recipient performer and as collaborator. He truly believes in the values and lessons within this workshop and looks forward to sharing it with the equity community. Giovanni has performed in Unscriptable, the Theatre Center, Sin and Sorrow, A Common to All at TIFT, and Star Trek Discovery on CBS. He has recently directed adapted productions of Romeo and Juliet and Julius Caesar, and he's currently developing a docuplay called STEM. So that is a bit of background on the wonderful folks who are going to be guiding us today. I will hand things over to Amelia. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. And I'm actually going to pass the conch to Derek to do a land acknowledgement on behalf of the ARCS team, which is zooming in today from.
Hello, everyone. The ARCS team is mostly based in Toronto, and we would like to acknowledge that we are on the land of the traditional land of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, including the Ojibway, and the Anishnabeg, including the Mississaugas of the Credit. I am specifically taking more time to say those names because I hear the words all the time and don't know what they mean. And I'm learning about their complicated history with the land and their continuing presence here. And at this point, I want to push a book, if you're in the Toronto region, called The Treaty Guide for Torontonians. It's published by Talking Treaties Collective and Jumblies. I'm in no way associated with them, but this is an amazing resource and continued learning. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Derek. And now on to Tahirih, who is doing double duty this evening, both as a facilitator and as our slideshow operator and animator. So we will just have an awareness of the fact that she's multitasking. And
thank you, Amelia.
Yeah, Tahirih will give us just sort of the agenda for the evening, the overview of what's in store in the next 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Yes, thanks for that, Amelia. I'm just gonna head back to this very first slide because I know we've had a lot of folks join us partway through that opening. And so I just dropped it in the chat as well, this question of, have you made a room agreement before? And you're welcome to just answer it in the chat, or you're welcome to head over to Menti and enter the code. And I'm actually going to switch over so we can kind of all see kind of the results thus far of how many folks have done a room agreement. And it seems like we have about 15 yeses on the app, but I do see about 4 or 5 more within the chat. So I feel like we're up around 20 people who have already done and participated in a room agreement. That's wonderful to see. And that number just keeps climbing, so wonderful. We have some folks who have never done a room agreement. And we have some folks who maybe have done something similar to that or are unsure whether they've had the chance to do one. So we all have varying level of experiences.
I'll continue to keep my fingers crossed for you.
I'm just gonna help mute someone here. There we go. Apologies. So that's just a quick little overview of our varying collective experiences with room agreements. And I'm now just going to bring us over to this other slide, and we're just going to have a quick overview as to what we will be going through today. So we're going to start with a bit of background on ARCs. What is ARCs? We'll move into a discussion of room agreements. We'll move into part 2, where we'll move into the actual making of. So making a room agreement, what goes into that. We'll talk about key concepts. Then we will go into breakout rooms and do the inventorizing of our individual values. And then we'll come back into our big group. And we will actually, this order is changed. I just realized we will go to a break, and then we will come into distilling into shared values. And then we will move into part 3, where we will talk about maintaining community values, ways in which to maintain, and also challenges to maintaining the community values or room agreement. And then we'll end off part 4 with reflections and questions. As well, if there's any access needs that you have, please let us know, whether through the chat or direct messaging us as well. And as well, when we go into breakout rooms, we will have specific rooms for the ASL interpreters. So if you do need to be specifically placed with them, please let us know, so we will be able to do that on our end and assist you with that. And again, feel free to turn your cameras off, keep them on, whatever you prefer. If you need to go to the bathroom or take little breaks, do as you need. And with all of that, I am going to hand things over to Amelia, who's going to take us into the background on ARCs.
Hello. Thank you all so much for being here. I just want to verify that everyone is able to see the screen that Tahirih is sharing. I had one comment in the chat from Corey, who is unable to see. But otherwise, are we all on the same page, as it were?
Can I just clarify what kind of device? If you are on some kind of smaller device like a phone, you might have to swipe to a different view to be able to maybe see a screen share. But if you're unable to, maybe I can help you on the back end, Corey.
So for those of you who have attended some of the other wonderful workshops and webinars that Equity has hosted, you'll notice the format here is a little bit different. And we thank you very much for this sort of more participatory vibe that we're going for, as we strongly believe that there's only really so much talking about or theorizing around the room agreement that you can do before you just have to roll up your sleeves and try one out. So a portion of this evening will be sort of more participatory to the extent that you feel comfortable this evening, where we'll give it a whirl together as sort of a more theoretical exercise, as though we were embarking together on a long-term collaborative process. And hopefully that will give you with a better grasp of the template that you might use in your own creative process to create your own room agreement. But first, for a bit of context, who are we and how did we come to be here this evening talking about room agreements? So we are ARCS, or we are the creators of ARCS, which stands for the Authentic, Radically Curious Support. And ARCS at its core is a toolbox for communication. And the tools that it offers are to empower theater makers to understand and transform conflict, to meet one another with their individual values and distill these into community values which can guide the collaborative process. And thirdly, to identify and navigate the challenges and vulnerabilities of the job, which impact group dynamics and our ability to both self-regulate and co-regulate, and therefore uphold the community agreement. So the tools are the bedrock of what became this multifaceted program, which includes preparatory meetings with the project leadership to discuss program implementation, and then facilitation by ARCS ambassadors on the first day of rehearsal and the first day of tech. And the goal is to give the skills to collaborators to co-create creative spaces where authenticity and radical curiosity can thrive and where everyone feels supported in the work. And it's a human-centered approach. I realize, of course, that's a bit of a jargony word these days, but hopefully throughout the course of our presentation, we'll expand a little further on what we mean by that. But human-centered approach, which encourages leaning in with curiosity and compassion to those moments of awkwardness, discomfort, and tension, and in fact, reframing these as portals to deeper understanding of one another inside the creative process. So as mentioned, ARCS was co-created by Alexis Gordon, Dave Ball, Richard Lamb, Tahirih Vejdani, and myself. It was incubated through Talk is Free Theatre, as well as through the support of Canada Council grants that we applied for through Talk is Free Theatre. And in the summer of 2022, we onboarded Derek Kwan, Scarlett Larry, and Giovanni Spina to be ARCS facilitators. The program was born of an urgent need to build new infrastructures which prioritize our humanity alongside our artistry inside the work. And I would say that a core belief of this team is that if you look after the human, the art will look after itself. I appreciate that might sound a bit reductive, but we will do our best work when we feel like our best selves. A significant portion of the R&D phase was interviewing not only professionals in a variety of roles within our industry, but looking beyond our field to connect with Dhamma practitioners, business professors, HR managers, and trauma-informed counselors, to name a few. The goal being to survey a range of tools for generating healthy group dynamics and curate and adapt where necessary those which we felt would be most vulnerable to the relevant work of making theater. The ARCS team has completed training or received certification in Nicole Brewer's Anti-Racist Theater, in Anima Leadership's Brave Conversations, Transforming Workplace Conflict, in equity bystander intervention training, which actually we're going to reference shortly, in mental health first aid, as well as in Kristen Neff's fierce self-compassion. And Richard Lamb is currently obtaining certification in conflict management at the Conrad Grebel University College at University of Waterloo. And the knowledge that he brings to us from that has become a real keystone of the program. But perhaps most importantly, the co-creators of ARCS bring to the program over 50 years of combined industry experience. And for us, it's vital that the program is peer-led. And indeed, A comprehensive analysis conducted in 2020 by the Stanford School of Medicine found that the reason that AA is one of the most effective behavior change programs of all time is precisely because it's peer-led. It's based on social interaction with people with similar goals who can provide both emotional support and practical tips based on lived experience. So ARCS is built by people in the industry for people in the industry, with the goal of facilitating for one another critical learning and perspective transformations. And those words, critical learning and perspective transformations, come to us via Barbary Redman, whom is someone that Tahirih has been reading. And now I'm going to hand it over to Tahirih.
Thank you, Amelia. I'm just going to go over a little bit more with background, talking about how ARCS would normally work when we are facilitating it in a room. So normally we begin ARCS with an information download on the nature of conflict. So here we discuss the 5 stages of conflict and the 5 core needs, which when go unmet, generate conflict. And as well, we go over tools and techniques for transforming conflict. We would then move into an interactive portion of gathering and distilling community values, touching on ideas for maintaining these community values, as well as discussing challenges to maintaining them as well. But today, we're doing something a little bit different for this workshop. We are going to start with the interactive portion of building the community agreement, and then get into the informative portion on the anatomy of conflict in the latter part of the workshop. Some of the places in which we've had the opportunity to implement ARCS are a variety of various theaters and schools, including Canadian Stage, Talk is Free Theatre, the Capitol Theatre, the Grand Theatre. Some academic institutions as well that we've been into include Randolph College for the Performing Arts, Sheridan College's Honours Bachelor of Musical Theatre Performance, the Sheridan College and University of Toronto, Mississauga Bachelor of Theatre and Drama Studies, as well as Queen's University, where we guest lectured for the BA Drama students at the Dan School of Drama and Music. If you're interested in ARCS as a program at your workplace, please reach out and we'd be happy to discuss. But now we're going to move on to the big matter at hand, which is room agreements. And I'm going to hand it over to Giovanni.
And sorry, if I may, I'm just going to interject really quickly.
Please.
That the reason we ultimately with ARCS decided to preempt the making of the room agreement with the sort of course on conflict is because, as was reaffirmed by the advanced questions that we got from many of you, and thank you very much for those, there's a preoccupation with, okay, but what do we do when the community values are betrayed or not upheld? And so we felt that front-loading the conversation with, here are some tools to deal with those situations, actually enabled that to be out of the way once it came to making a summary of values that could be actionable and embodied. But given the nature of the workshop this evening, we're going to start off with that and talk about conflict as one of the challenges to maintenance of the room agreement. Take it away, Gio.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So thank you so much for everybody who has answered with an mentee. It seemed like a lot of people had participated in the room agreement, some hadn't, and some weren't too sure if they had. So this is kind of to address what we at ARCS believe is a room agreement. And our working definition is a community agreement is a compilation of values co-created by a group to support healthy collaboration. Now, you may notice within our definition, we use agreement versus values. And this is activated and aspirational. The reason we prefer to refer to it as values versus agreement is because it moves us away from the idea of a binding contract and towards goals to which we can aspire. And this, as I said before, is a working definition. our definition, just as our idea of a community agreement, is one we're continually refining, trying to make it as practical and robust as possible. So this is what we bring to you today. And maybe with collaboration or participation with you, we may have new ideas to implement within what we're creating here in our room agreement. So moving on, some people just kind of start realizing what are the benefits and some of the pitfalls. And these are just a sample of some of the ideas that we have either experienced in our years of knowledge or that we've heard have happened when in consultation with other artists or leadership. So just to go over some of the things we have here, the benefits of it, and as we stated before, is the human-centered approach. And this approach enables us to meet one another as humans before we meet others as characters in our creative roles. And this is incredibly important because before you get into it, we have to work together, not only in rehearsals or in the scenes, but also in the sides as human beings when you're on break or even just discussing what you're talking about, no matter what art you're working towards. Exercise of co-creating a room agreement jumpstarts authentic relationships. And the reason we believe is because when I'm vulnerable and share my values with you, I am giving you insight to who I am as a human. Another one is it reveals different communication styles. This allows us to observe how our colleagues express themselves, what's important to them, how they feel about what they're expressing, how maybe what language they use. This will kind of help us not only through the collaborative approach to the actual work we're doing, but also, again, cycling back to the human-centered approach. This will highlight that. Another one is it opens a channel for sharing needs throughout the process. And this is important because it normalizes this at the onset. It normalizes the fact that I will express my values, there'll be space for it, and there'll be space to communicate about it, either between two or more people. And it empowers all the voices in the room. And this is one of the most important. I mean, all these are important, but empowering all of the voices in the room is something that we really like to focus on by inviting participants from everyone. And this is including the people, the performers, the creative team, everybody involved in this, and fosters a sense of agency in determining how the collaborative process will feel. Now focusing on the pitfalls, and this again is just a small sample of it, and I'll ask shortly for some input from you. But limiting, the room agreement can be limiting if it's used to penalize rather than support. And this takes away the advocacy of the group and centralizes the intent on ascribing behavior and away from community beliefs. And kind of inherent with our definition, the important part is that it is created together, and that creation of values and beliefs isn't something that is dictated down, but it's something that we all create all together. The other point is it's devalued if not maintained. Regardless of whether the practice of writing a room agreement begins the process and opens the conversation, the type of space the room would like to work, if this isn't continued, if this momentum isn't continued, and we'll talk about this in later in our presentation, writing a room agreement could turn into a symbolic and not an active practice. Another thing that can happen in discussing a room agreement is that it can devolve into quibbling or talking about the semantics. And the unfortunate part about this is it places the importance on the personal understanding and experience of the word over the intent of the word. And personally, I like to think of it as the idea of the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law, of what we're trying to say. And appreciating that all of us come from different backgrounds, and maybe not the specific words we use is not the most important. Now I want to move forward to, if you have any questions, any further ideas on potential benefits and or pitfalls. I will look over to the chat to see if anybody has anything that they would like to say. Feel free to either raise your hand or feel free to type into the chat. I see Stephen S. has raised their hand. If you may speak.
Yeah, I think for me, just adding to one of the pitfalls is like, I feel sometimes what happens is you make these agreements in the beginning of the rehearsal process, but then when you move into tech, you don't have time to also take the time to create that with the production team. And so then what happens is it's like values and needs that are met in the rehearsal hall sometimes fall apart when you move into Q to Q, for instance.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anytime, thank you so much for that, Stephen. Anytime there is, in ARCs, we believe anytime somebody's added to the production, that is, especially happens during tech, but also if it potentially happens at any point in the process, kind of folding somebody into the agreement that we've created and allowing them to participate in adding to that is also very important. Anybody else would like to raise your hand or add to the chat? Sorry, okay. I see in the chat from Valerie, pitfalls. A question I've heard is that it may separate, separate from NIOS and the first day chat. I'm not exactly sure what NIOS. Anybody in ARCs? Oh,
not in our space.
Yes, thank you so much. That it may separate in the first aid chat. Oh, I see. So the issue that we're seeing is that sometimes it's separated from what those two things can be. And we also address that at a certain point, a room agreement doesn't address when things get escalated to these next issues. And we respect that as a part of ARCs, and we also work in tandem, as we'll refer later to, with equity and all of what they offer, and that the room agreement definitely has its place in talking about conflicts and how we address ARCs before allows us to kind of circumvent any of these issues that may happen. But yes, thank you so much.
I think Alexis, who's not here, would her turn of phrase to describe ARCs is that it's like the first aid kit. But when you need an ambulance or when there's an emergency, then there are other pre-existing and proven channels and avenues to follow. And certainly in the case of use, the recourses outlined in Not in Our Space will be more helpful.
Thank you, Amelia. Thank you. And Jane quite pointed out, but a room agreement is core to NIOS. NIOS is mainly about preventing abuse before it starts. Bonnie in the chat says, it hasn't been my experience so far, but a perceived pitfall that I've had suggested to me is that it can take too long to put together and everyone worries about time. Yes, absolutely. I think that we've experienced that, and we have a suggested amount of time that we like to take, at least for this room agreement, to find that middle ground. I think that the hope is that this will prevent any issues that may occur later on in the process. So any time that's lost in the beginning or perceived that is lost in the beginning will be saved by preventing any of the issues that may come up. But it's definitely a valuable pitfall that we have experienced. So that's all for this section over here. I'm going to forward it on to Amelia, and who will talk next.
Thanks, Gio. Okay. Right. Why talk about values? So this actually was a tool that we encountered in the equity bystander training, and it will be on the next slide, but it's called the Pyramid of Harm. And it suggests that, and rightly so, I think, that our attitudes or beliefs, and we would posit here that values is a synonym, prescribe or determine the actions and behaviors that get normalized within a working environment. So if we look at this pyramid of harm, we have a little animation where we thought we'd walk through an example. And again, this is sourced directly from the Equity Bystander Intervention Training. But can we fire that animation, Tahirih? Yeah, so at this sort of ground level of the pyramid, if we follow through with, for example, always saying yes as being an attitude, belief, or value that we agree to uphold, or that this can result in, if we take from the next level of the pyramid, say non-consensual exposure, which then removes the autonomy of the individual who feels compelled to always say yes and will be afraid of reprisal if they behave differently. And at the pinnacle, or at the zenith of this pyramid of harm, it might result in a physical expression such as non-consensual touching. So here's an example of how a value that we have down here can escalate to that kind of noxious outcome up there. Whereas if we flood that first level with with values that will empower us rather than compromise autonomy, the hope is that we can actually transform this into an anti-violence pyramid. So using this example, if instead of always say yes, the value to which we choose to aspire or hope to aspire or aim to aspire is consent, to say yes when I feel yes, to act from a place of feeling the yes rather than an obligation to say yes, then the behavior potentially, which is normalized, is respecting boundaries, and autonomy is preserved. And this might result in a physical expression such as a beautiful contact improv. But really, I think the point here is that it's important to talk about values in doing something like a community value agreement, because these are the bedrock of the rest of the pyramid. They normalize the actions and behaviors, or they prescribe the behaviors and actions that get normalized in the microcosms we're creating in our rehearsal rooms. Another reason to talk about values, and we can move on to the next slide, thanks, Tahirih, is, I'm just gonna make sure my experience has been moving more deeply into the much work faster. Okay, great. These are some great comments. Sorry, I just wanted to follow along. So we thought we'd talk here briefly about the phenomenon of path dependence. I first encountered this turn of phrase reading a very dense book by a preeminent media scholar named John Durham Peters. It was called The Marvelous Clouds. And I wanted to further understand it because in the context of that book, and indeed one of the applications for this term, is that it's used to explain institutional inertia, or why it is so hard for institutions to change or to forge new paths. And a more academic definition of it would be that the logic we use often corresponds to historical imprints of past environments. But in my own efforts to digest this concept, in my own words, I would say that what it means is that the path we're on prescribes to a large extent the path we take, because it is, after all, the path of least resistance. Or another image might be that we would lay the next stone in the path by reaching behind us for one of the ones that got us this far. And so in order to really build a new path, we have to venture out and gather new stones to lay that new path. And this is where intentionality around values can help us do that. Being intentional around our values is akin to going out and gathering the new bricks and the new stones to lay the new path. So this handy little visual that Derek found from the internet illustrates how when we rely on past practices, decisions, and actions and ignore present conditions, we get the same outcome, i.e. the path forges ahead in the way that it always has. Whereas if we interrogate past practices, decisions, and actions, or recontextualize them, while at the same time accounting for present conditions, we get possible new outcomes. And this is a way to break the cycle of path dependency. And so, yeah, again, just this idea that getting really explicit about our values can help us truly forge the new path rather than simply do what we've always done, because that's how the system is built, and because we're used to rehearsing 10 to 6 days a week, and we're used to performing 8 times a week, regardless of whether or not there's demand for it. How do we go out, gather the new stones, build a new path? So our proposal is that the room agreement is one way of doing that. And I think that's it for me. Onwards to Derek.
All right, so we are going to move into making a room towards making a room agreement altogether. And one of the things that we do in ARCs before we do that is to identify some key concepts and to get different definitions and different notions of what these words might mean to us. So I will invite everyone to go over to the Menti code. I think that will be put into the chat in a bit. So the reason why we do this is because each of us have unique and personal experiences of different words. And it can help to deepen and broaden our collective understanding by compiling a list of understandings and definitions, not a definitive definition, but just sort of seeing what notions people carry with them and what different flavors or shades of different words exist. So we're going to ask you for your response to these words and what they mean to you. I'll give on the Menti, when you go over to the Menti, we'll give you 1 or 2 minutes per word, and then we'll discuss sort of we'll go through all of the collected definitions and discuss them. And as we explore these words, think about how they might show up in your community values. These are words that sort of underpin a lot of where we're coming from, a lot of what the values are going to be rooted in, and what we're trying to accomplish together. So I just wanted to note that usually what we do at this point is we have everyone in the room in our circle to jot down their definitions, and we'll write them down onto a large piece of paper. But because of the situation today, we're going to try to use Menti and try to get through it that way. So Tahirih, are we, the first word, is that up? Okay, so we'll add your responses to the Menti.
So empathy, trying to see, understand something from someone else's perspective. Listening is the number one thing for me, just to listen without judgment. Sensitivity to how others feel, understanding other feelings. The ability to understand and share the feelings of another, experiencing another's perspective, understanding someone else's feelings, understanding how others feel, sharing feelings of others, working to understand someone else's experience, putting yourself in shoes to understand, feeling or trying to feel what another person is feeling, extending generosity to those around you that they are doing their best, an understanding of others and their experience, understanding and listening, sensitivity to feelings, understanding another's perspective may be different and just as valuable, understanding the feelings in life situations others with whom you are collaborating, putting yourself in their shoes and being open to their needs, listening, being a sensitive colleague. It means caring and stepping into another's experience, sensitivity to how other people feel, opening, oh, I lost the end of that. Care for what it might be like to be in someone else's shoes. Opening to listen, yes, being open to listen. Understanding and giving space for someone's feelings, though what someone is experiencing is not my, sorry, can you scroll down for me? Is not my experience, yeah. Actively present in listening and understanding, sharing emotional energy and energetically, understanding what someone is going through, even though I haven't gone through it myself. The active work of trying to understand what another person's perspective, feelings, and experiences might be like, being seen and heard, considering that others have experiences you don't understand, and an ability to understand another person's perspective and recognize the difficulties that they might experience different from your own experience.
Thank you for all those definitions. So as we can see, there are certain words and terms and notions that appear again and again: understanding someone else, feeling, being seen and heard. And as we move forward, we'll see other, hopefully similar things. So the next word is compassion. What does compassion mean to you?
So if you're in the same Menti link, the new question will have populated in whatever browser or app you might have been using.
Compassion means kindness, means showing care for others' experiences, feeling someone else's pain, allowing your heart to feel what it feels when someone shares their pain, hurt, love, joy, feeling for others, caring for others and what they might be experiencing, whether you're aware of it or not, actively taking care of someone, care for another person and their experiences, taking care of someone else, not only caring but supporting others and making effort to understand their needs, not just assume what they are, the kindness you lead with, feeling softness, love, understanding for another's experience, whether I share that feeling or not, giving attention to the challenges of others, holding someone else's lived experience as valid, caring, a lens of care and support for others, caring without judgment, loving the person and their experience, leaning into others, seeing others and letting them know, a feeling of support and connection with what another person is going through, concern and sympathy and care for others who are hurting, extending grace and care towards someone going through a difficult experience, putting myself into someone else's shoes to consider how I would experience what they are going through, respecting how they are experiencing it, finding generosity and heart for someone who is struggling, to feel concern for others' experiences in a shared way, being active and present for someone else's experience, understanding another's suffering and being concerned and wanting to help reduce suffering, being open and kind, no negative judgment, being someone's soft place to fall.
Thank you. Those are beautiful.
Truly. And one of the joys of holding empathy and compassion side by each like this is, particularly for the actor process, empathy is what you do with and for your character. You truly embody those emotional states. Whereas compassion, the roots of the word are with suffering. And as we saw in all of your beautifully poetic reflections here, it's being with the suffering that enables you to provide the care, because you don't actually sink under the weight of the experience yourself. So compassion is what we can extend to colleagues and humans, and empathy is what we aspire to give to the character, as well as to our friends. But that's a little nuance there.
Thank you for that. All right, so the next word is respect. And the word respect can mean many different things. And so we want to include a number of different definitions that include respect for self, respect for others, and also respect for objects. So think about that when you're trying to find out what it means to you, and what does respect mean for you.
So we have for what does respect mean to you? Care of place, space, self, and others. Holding space for ourselves and everyone else, being kind. Listening, making space. Boundaries, integrity, listening again, asking for clarity. Acknowledging your interconnectedness with others, people and things. Values, others, space, objects, and yourself as valued and worthy of care and consideration. Aretha Franklin. Time, considering and listening. Valuing something and treating it as we would like to be treated. Knowing who you are, what you deserve in interactions, and giving that same level of treatment to those with whom you interact. Listening, caring for, learning from, appreciative of. Honoring your boundaries, showing people care and regard, making space, not assuming, showing curiosity. Giving others the same courtesies as you would want for yourself and anyone else in all ways. Treating with care, dignity, and honoring each other's personal power/sovereignty. Giving space to others' opinions, being clear in word and thought. Treating others and self like it matters that they are safe. Listening to and have space to grow. Working towards understanding others' goals and needs and valuing other people and yourself within a space and place. Pausing and listening. For others, meeting them where they are, treating them how they would like to be treated. A reverence for the values of others and how they got where they are, even when it differs from your journey.
Thank you for that. As you can see, there's many different definitions that we have here, and part of what we do for ARCs is, again, we would all together put these onto a piece of paper that hopefully can live in the room throughout the process and be added to as a living document throughout the process. And as you'll find, there are lots of different shades of meanings for these words that for different people, and some of them are very illuminating. Of the way that I see respect might be different from yours, and so it's very helpful to remind ourselves of what that could be. So let's go on to the next word. The last word that we'll do together like this is safety. And just like respect, there are a lot of different types of safety. So to keep in mind, there's physical safety. There's also psychosocial safety, chemical safety, and biological safety. So there are a lot of different types of safety. What does safety mean to you?
Boundaries, permission to say no if you're not comfortable, belonging, respecting a person's physical and emotional boundaries, trust, not compromising physical well-being. It would mean being free. Oh my, what a concept. A feeling that others have respect for you and your boundaries. Feeling comfortable in a social space with people to be physically unharmed and boundaries and words are respected. That opportunity to be harmed is reduced, free from intentional harm from others, but not necessarily free from feeling harmed. Freedom from harm or potential of harm. Feeling comfortable, unimpaired by stress, belonging in the space, welcome, that issues will be treated with accountability so I can be safe and brave. Feeling you can trust others, believing that others have your best interests at heart, no anxiety. Feeling at peace to put as much of myself into a space as I want to, without pressure to be more or less. Knowing you will be forgiven for mistakes if you own them. Knowing you can fly without a net. Agency and sovereignty of self. That I can show up as my full self. Lack of judgment, kindness, honesty, and respect. Having boundaries respected, physical and emotional. Belonging, comfort in order to risk. Holding the best intentions above all. Safety is collective intent being able to maintain the needs and boundaries of each other while also knowing that your needs and boundaries are also being valued and taken care of. A place where I can share my authentic self with others in a creative and critical way. Care for the mind, body, and soul of all in a space, physical or otherwise. No re-traumatizing. Being able to relax, explore, and non-shamed. A space where judgment is not welcome.
Thank you for those. Wow, so we see that there's already, we're expanding our own definitions and including others in the room. And we find this really helpful in ARCs, because as we have a collective understanding of these words, then we can, when we use them, we all have a better understanding of what they could mean for other people. And a lot of the things that have been pulled up already and mentioned are things that we'll mention in a little while, which is wonderful. So we're gonna, yep, Amelia?
Like it's clear that how generative it is to have all of that in the air before transitioning into the next part, which is trying to make the community agreement. And I always find it like really reassuring to sense that I'm surrounded by people with such beautiful ideas and beautiful viewpoints on these words.
And the intentionality too of putting that into the room really, really helps to change the temperature in the room. So we're going to move on to the next part, which will involve breaking out into rooms, and we'll be gathering individual values. And this is usually what we do after we've defined those 4 words. And these individual values, again, we'll be cataloging them so that as we're embarking together on, as if we're together for a long-term collaborative process. So we're going to basically do what we would normally do in a room to let you experience what that's like. We'll spend about 20 minutes in the breakout rooms and then have a 10 to 15 minute break, and then come back together after that for some more activities together. So what we're doing now is going to collect those values, and there's a reminder that discussing our community values is not about creating policies, rules, legislation, or a prescription. And it's also not a guarantee that harm will not occur. These values are what we aspire to and what we want to put into the room to populate those values at the bottom of that pyramid so that it can lead the spirit of our actions at the top. It's about being intentional about what we want to strive for every day so that we can come to work feeling inspired and work and play with our full selves. So This is aspirational, and part of what we want to ask you is what you want the room to feel like when you enter a rehearsal hall or the theater or what other environment you might be in. What do you want it to feel like? What are the values with which we want to imbue our space as we work together? So the prompt that we use for this is, I need a space that values blank to maintain healthy collaboration. And you're free to fill that blank in with whatever you want. Some examples are, I need a space that values asking questions without passing judgment to maintain healthy collaboration. I need a space that values speaking in draft while we're working through fresh ideas out loud. I need a space that values laughter and where we strive to have fun every day. Or I need a space that values obtaining consent before touching one another, not just in the context of intimacy, but for every physical interaction. So we're going to go into breakout rooms at this point. You should be receiving an invitation to go into the breakout room, and one of the four of us will be, are we going to do four? Yeah, we'll do four. And if you need assistance with the breakout rooms, please hang back and we can help you get into the right room. And also our ASL interpreters will be in breakout room 1. And if you need to be placed with them, then please let us know.
Do we have, I guess we don't have anyone that needs to manually be put in one, so we can just join our rooms by the looks of it. I will go into 3. Or Amelia, I think.
Yes.
I don't know. Oh, your old account went into 3. I got it. You're going into 4. Okay, or you're going to 2. See on the other side. Okay.
Hi, Kira.
Hello. We'll see you all shortly in 15 minutes, Amelia, back at 8:15.
Yep.
Fabulous. Great.
Thanks, Jane.
I'm gonna put up the 10-minute one in 2 minutes.
Should I close the rooms, or how do you guys want to handle this?
I think they can just filter out. I think we did say, I think I'll put a timer on in 2 minutes. That is a 10-minute timer so that everyone knows by 8:15 to be back, hopefully.
Cool.
But I don't necessarily end the breakout rooms. They did get the notice if you want it. I hope you enjoyed that bird video. But let me end that sound. Okay.
Do we have to spotlight each other again?
I think we do. I think the spotlights did remove. So that's, if someone could do that, I'm just going to get the slide ready on my end. Thanks, Derek.
Interpreters. There we are.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We are kind of going into this next process of distilling these shared values, or distilling your individual values into a version of shared values that encompasses the community agreement. You may have done some of these steps within your individual breakout groups already. And so some of the key steps that we tend to utilize while trying to figure out how to do this process, we often try to identify emerging themes that everyone, from the things that people have offered. So things like communication, safety, you might see themes of time management or logistics arise, but every document is different. And these are all living, breathing documents, and the idea that what is created on that first day isn't what's at the end of the process, and that it is continuously contributed to as things emerge, and as we realize that there is something that is important and that is a value that we haven't identified yet, but as we go through the work, we realize something is missing. So it's very key, actually, to this concept of it being a living, breathing document, and that it's not in print, or in the sense that it's not finalized. Another key step is synthesizing these themes into representative values. So we're trying to bring them up into that macro level. And then as well, obtaining confirmation from the group, because it's really important that everyone is on board with what is being created. So I'm gonna move to the 4 different documents that have been created, so that we all can get an idea to see how different the process is, or how it can be different, and the different stages at which we can get to it with. And it's important to note that this step is challenging. Like, doing the work of synthesizing is challenging. So often having facilitators helps to bring an objective lens to the process. And this isn't a definitive way of doing this process. Like, the way that we're presenting to you isn't the only way, but we found that it's worked for us thus far. I'm going to change the screen over to our first breakout room, the one that Derek was facilitating. And so maybe Derek, I'll let you take the lead on maybe identifying those themes in your group. There we go. Does everyone see that? Great. Also just going to make this a little bit larger.
It's a bit small. That's the only thing I would have said.
All right, so you'll see here, this is a list of the values that were compiled in the room. And yeah, honesty, respect, consent, everyone's contribution, and which we amended or were appended, everyone's voice is heard and accepted, listening, an enduring respect for the goal of our process, humor, silence, listening, peace, professionalism, equity, freedom to explore and play with child's wonder and curiosity. And we appended free from judgment. Open-mindedness, check-ins, understanding and forgiveness when mistakes are made, includes self-forgiveness. So some of these we went into more discussion on. So for example, freedom to explore and play with child's wonder and curiosity. We asked to expand on that a little bit to explore what that actually, what that meant. Yeah. So from here, we can see that there's certain themes that are coming up: freedom, open-mindedness, understanding and forgiveness. So we could start from here on. The next process would be to put them into groups.
Which group number 2 can show you an example of?
Yeah.
So here we gathered our values, and then we had enough time to color code them by sort of theme or family. Thank you, Tahirih, or overlap. The one sort of outlier being this idea of the trauma-informed space, being aware of hidden or invisible traumas or disabilities, and cultivating a knowledge of the 7 principles of the trauma-informed space, which would require education for the whole group, and is more really of a lens through which to do the work. So we accommodated that one by qualifying the space up here, a trauma-informed space that values. And then if Tahirih can scroll down to page 2, once we had these sort of families of values, we put them into a little table so that we could just see them all together. And we even got as far as, with all of these sort of time-based ones, time to process and reflect and allow things to percolate, being sensitive to time and valuing it, patience, reflection. Sort of our proposal here was to distill that to time. We strive for a space that values time for patience, reflection, processing, and percolating. And then here in the pink family, where we had risk-taking, play and creativity, being able to speak in draft and allowing for imperfection, a sense of humor, failure, trying something new before criticizing. We were sort of getting into distilling that to encouragement of fearless exploration with openness and a sense of humor. And one group member very astutely observed that our original language there, which was encouragement of fearless exploration without judgment and with a sense of humor, was, can we turn the negative into actually a positive, into something affirmative that we're going after? So that was like a really nice edit to have made. And then our next steps would be to repeat that process for this tangerine family and for the mint family as well. But the idea here being, how does it sift through the delta into something that, rather than being in a 20-page document that's stapled to a bulletin board that no one ever refers to again, how can we build a community or room agreement that I could repeat to you on the street corner if I bump into you an hour from now. Because really, what hope do I have of embodying it or practicing it if I don't know it, if I can't even say it to my colleague? So that's the idea here in terms of this distillation process.
I'm going to share our group's kind of process in which we went through this of collecting the individual needs that everyone identified. And as we went through it, we went back again to give voice to things that might have been missed. So if after everyone had shared, if they felt like there was something that still wasn't encompassed or already included, there was opportunity to add more to it after everyone had a chance to share. What we started to do was to identify kind of key words or themes that were emerging. So we used the color coding in a similar way. But we also identified that things fall under more than one category. So you'll see things like instant joy, instant and joyous forgiveness. We are all going to make mistakes, kind of fell under the categories or themes of generosity and playfulness and forgiveness. Or for example, questions, no matter how awkward, fell under those themes of generosity, but also respect. And then another one, for example, we had was working hard towards the creative goal together, but also having fun fell under, as you can see, a theme for the capacity for hard work emerged that the group identified, but also through that capacity for hard work, having it imbued with that playfulness theme as well too was really important. So that was the stage in which we got to within identifying the emerging themes in this document. I'm going to flip over to our fourth one.
And similar to Derek, we got really to the beginning aspect of it, and that is just laying out just some of the basic community values that we have. We hadn't yet gone over into the emerging themes or even the synthesis, but kind of just laid out what are the things that people had felt about. And some of the prompts that were also encouraged is, reading over what other people wrote. Did that bring out anything within yourself that you want to add to it? Is there anything that you had questions about? Any clarity that you needed, and kind of moving forward in that way?
I believe we're going to move into, Amelia, can you just refresh my memory which documents we're going to focus on?
Well, since we're on this one, why don't we just give it a whirl all together to try and pull out the themes here, the themes and the overlaps, and see how we might shake these down. And sorry, it's coming up a lot, and there's some question around what speaking in draft means. So maybe I'll just take the opportunity. The one definition proffered here in the chat is speaking without editing oneself and being allowed to do that. And I would agree, my own version of that means permission to revise and to not have the perfect or final iteration of the idea, even as you are searching for the idea. Much like this presentation. So, Tahirih, do you want to, how do we want to do this? Do we all just want to sort of have a go at what these might be?
Yeah. And even as well for the participants, like feel free to offer themes that you see emerge as well. either in the chat or raise your hand, because we want your inclusion in that as well.
Agreed.
And already Cody has identified time seems like a common theme in this one. So maybe what's helpful for everyone? Do we want to highlight, or do we want to pull them down into different kind of quadrants?
Start with highlighting them so that we can see them on the page.
Great.
Leniency with time. For me, work-life balance is also connected to time. Flexible schedules depending on the group. Curiosity, transparency. And you might say that snacks and washroom breaks, I mean, those are sort of like bio needs, but that you have the time and freedom to, what's the word I'm looking for, to sort of govern those yourself. They could possibly fall under time. What else? Number 3, 5, and 7 feel like they go together. And Chelsea's saying that there's something about 11 that also feels like this time. Just what was 11? Space that values both hard work and fun. That's true. That's actually an echo in some ways of the work-life balance, but I think it's also within the work. A theme, the artist first before the art. So things like great. Artist as people first. And what were 3, 5, and 7? I'm looking at Anna's comment here. Authenticity. I'd like to be honest about how I'm feeling each day, okay, which could be the content of check-ins before, after, or during process. And similarly, experiences. I'm not asked to leave those at the door. So folding real life into the work. Yeah. On the same notes as ours before the art, making mental health a priority. Respect for every person. Okay, so let's, after time.
Do you think maybe the 3, 5, and 7 would also fall under the artist first before the art? Sorry, yeah. I might have missed if you had already said that as I was highlighting.
No, I'm just wondering if like a good title for that might be respect.
And I think authenticity.
I heard a voice.
I think someone said authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
Just to clarify, because I'm falling behind in highlighting, we have time. There was a suggestion of the artist first before the art. Do we feel like the ones of authenticity, because we're going to find these themes, like a lot of the things we identify, there's going to be overlap on them. So authenticity
Davis has a good suggestion
feels related to the artist before the art.
Davis has a good suggestion in the chat that sort of combines those of respect of the individual.
Respective individual, yeah. Which is also the human before the artist.
Exactly.
The work, yeah. So there I would, yeah.
Would we feel like authenticity falls within that as well then? Or authenticity as its own? And we'll come back to that.
I would leave that for now. And then it seems like generosity, curiosity, equality, that these are all about sort of virtues that we want to go for in the work. So, or that are about the creative practice. So, I mean, I would put that into something like, this space strives to value leading with an open heart, or leading with that curiosity and generosity.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Don't really.
I know this is the difficult process of synthesis, so it is a back and forth conversation with also more than just the facilitator. So as you're doing in the chat and adding verbally, this is what it takes, and it's going to be hard, and we're going to have differing ideas of what those emerging themes are, or how we want to verbalize or write what the synthesis is going to be like.
Can I suggest, Tahirih, that we put somewhere on the page the sort of macro prompt, which is, we are striving for
a space. Yeah. Great.
So what can we say about time? Like a space that values a flexible and balanced use of time. Respect of the individual and their fluctuating their fluctuating feelings and capacity day to day. That values authentic expression, but does that cover other things? 7, 10, 13, the creative process. Yep, I like that.
What about communication? I think there's the one about proper flow of information between team members might be an overarching theme of communication.
And so
maybe that's also respect.
Yeah, the creative process, let's qualify that with some of those beautiful words in there. So a creative process, where's the one about, a creative process that honors free-flowing artistic impulses, curiosity, generosity, and equality.
So that's, let me just go back here for a second. So we said generosity,
curiosity,
7, 10, 13. Curiosity. Yes. Equality. Am I missing one?
No. So
I liked your identification of communication, a communication process that values accountability and transparency. But that was a good identification of groupings.
Can that be repeated?
A communication process marked by
that values,
that values transparency and accountability. So we might also, I don't know if communication process is speaking more to the logistics in the hall of it, but we could also just say transparent And yeah, no, that's
accountable communication.
yeah, just to sort of synthesize even further. Individual care outside the rehearsal space, so individuals can be careful inside the rehearsal space. So I wonder if that, yes, it does have to do with respect, absolutely.
And just to repeat some of the things people are saying, 3, 5, and where is it? Sorry. 3, 5, and 7 also go with the respect, as people have noted.
Yeah.
So 3 orange, 5 red chicken, and
check-ins
7.
also, check-ins are also about authentic expression, which we have on there.
I feel like my life experiences is also falls under the category of authenticity.
Yeah.
And sorry, check-ins you said fell under which one as well, Amelia?
Authentic expression, same.
As well, right.
Here's where I'm at today, and I have the space to say that. Self-awareness. So that's for me also about accountability, how one's behavior is being received or engaged with by others. And we do have transparent, and you'll just want to change that noun to an adjective there on the green, accountable.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
And then, yeah, asking for permission. So that is respect as well, might we say. And sorry, Chelsea saying 9, self-awareness, and 16 go together. Agreed. And self-awareness. For the self. Yes. Okay, so
just a couple seconds for me to catch up. 12 and 18 about communication.
Asking for permission, that's transparent communication.
Communication. Self-awareness, I just need that's number 9. So 9 and 16 as respect, or is that just trying to clarify that comment? How one's behavior is being received or engaged with by others. Is that accountability, or is that our own, I guess, clarification on this? Self-awareness of how our own behavior is being received or engaged with by others. So this individual being self-aware, which is going to be tied into, actually, this is a nice will be a nice thread into when we get into talking about unmet needs and ways of maintenance, and a lot of that stuff will come a little bit later. But so self-awareness, we are striving for a space that values.
I think point 9 is covered in. Yeah, no, I agree that it does have to. 9 is covered by respect and accountability, but maybe we need to pull out accountability from. So transparent communication is one thing, and then accountability belongs.
As its own thing. So transparent communication.
Yeah.
But accountability for.
So, but I might put personal accountability and respect of the individual. They live side by each. Their fluctuating feelings and capacities throughout the day, authentic expression, and a creative process that honors free-flowing artistic impulses, curiosity, and generosity, and equality. I mean, at the end of the day, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 there, right? 6. 6 distilled from 18. there's stuff happening in the chat.
Agreed. Communication is a means for accountability. Isn't question mark, right?
Oh, okay. I've been asked to either wrap it up or include you in the process of what we're driving at. So just to echo what Tahirih said, this is the hard part. And this is the part where, you know, as one of the questions alluded to that we received in advance, how do you deal with disagreement in room agreements? I have not agreed with a statement in the past, but didn't want to speak up. But I think what we're driving at here is how do we take a very long laundry list of individual values and try to distill them into larger shared values that are doable and that can actually be embodied, rather than something that remains an overly litigious weight on our heads that is not going to support the creative process, but can feel like it actually just hampers the creative process. So yes, I agree. I acknowledge this is a painstaking process, but what we're trying to do here is say, okay, from this beautiful and full list of 18 values, how can we get it down to something that we still feel honors everything that's been said, but makes it something that we could repeat to each other on outside of the rehearsal context, and something that we can therefore actually embody and do.
So does this feel, and this isn't a complete process right now, because there might still be the nitty-gritty of things to work through, but right now, I think that this is giving you an idea of what that process is like. So because one of the suggested steps that we also presented to you was obtain confirmation from the group. So what we have here right now as a macro level of this agreement is we are striving for a space that values transparent communication, accountability, a flexible and balanced use of time, respect of individuals and their fluctuating feelings and capacity throughout the day, authenticity in expression, and creative process that honors free flowing artistic impulses, curiosity, generosity, and equality. So right now, this can be the representative of a working community agreement. It isn't the end result, and it should be added to, is how we like to approach this process.
And just also to say, I don't think that Zoom facilitates this kind of group brainstorming. So thank you for your
yeah.
Great.
Oh, go ahead, Gio.
Yeah, I'll take it on from here. So as we were saying, the beginning part of this, which is usually done or should be done on the first day to kind of start the atmosphere and the environment off in a healthy manner, in a way that everybody agrees upon. And the next part of that, which had kind of already been brought up through a question or a comment to the pitfall, is how do we maintain community values? And there's some really simple ways of doing it, and then other things that need to be planned out or articulated by the group. One of them is to make sure there is a visual prominence in the space. So the thing is, how do you make sure the Bristol board, or the thing that you put it on, is visible, that you can see it. There's prominence. Add some Sharpies, add some strings, just really basic. Make sure it's seen. Another idea behind this is make sure there's check-ins. Figure out, are those check-ins going to be daily? Are those check-ins going to be weekly? An idea is a simple 5 to 10 minutes at the start of the day before diving into the work. Use a word, a gesture, a phrase, a metaphor, an image, so on and so forth, to share how you're doing. That just opens up the space to allow people to feel willing to greet each other with where they are, and also to go kind of bring forward anything that they feel is necessary for the work. And this was kind of touched upon through other values that have been mentioned about not having to put aside your the person that you are outside of the rehearsal room, of being able to kind of bring in and say, you know, right now I'm feeling this way, and this may affect my work. I'm feeling a little fragile, or kind of coming to the room like that. A weekly check-in example would be something, you know, like 15 to 20, because we're trying to encompass a little more of the week, minutes at the last day of the week, asking questions in the room, like, did we honor our community values this week? What did we do well? Where can we improve? Are there any values we want to add, subtract, modify? And again, that's highlighting the fact that it is a living document. It's not something that we create at the beginning of the rehearsal period and then kind of just say, there it is, we'll refer to it just to check up on things. Another thing is folding in newcomers. And this is kind of addressing the question or the comment that was added later, is how do we introduce newcomers to the space, process, to our community values? How do we make sure that they feel that they know what we've agreed upon in our room on the first day? And how do you make sure that they also feel like they can involve themselves in what it is that they're creating? Because again, they have entered into the community that we have been working on for however long before they've come into the room. Yeah, so all these things are trying to make it evident, apparent, create an environment where you can modify the board, or that the board is thought out, it's visual, it's dynamic, and just centered on your day, so that people are able to go, we're coming here as humans first, and then as artists we'll create the work. So just as a question, again, encouraging you to either write down in the chat or raise your hand. Are there any other ideas? It's just a sample of what we have thought of for maintaining community values. Does anybody have any other ideas for how to maintain community values?
Someone mentioned checkouts in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Exactly. Again, putting the human first in the process. I think that covers quite a few, and there's definitely things to work through. Weekly action. If group has a particular value, could extend to a specific action. Exactly. So that's a really, really great way of making sure that the values are brought up within the pyramid. If you think that they're not actually being appreciated or realized on a tangible level or in a tangible way, is there something that we can do at a week? That's a really great idea. Thank you so much, Nicole. Alana said, might be a good idea to revisit before moving to the stage, possibly having a version that's specific for backstage and performances. I definitely like the revisiting. I think that especially, depending on the rehearsal process, the duration, thinking of how these values have been created in a specific room, and how now that you're no longer in that physical space, the importance of them may kind of wane in that idea. I think that's a really good idea. And also to the idea that this is a living document, maybe there are some ideas that come up in people's minds. So maybe it doesn't necessarily have to create a new one, but and just to build upon what Elena said, maybe when we enter into that new space, is there anything that comes to people's mind that we can add to what we've already created? Because the idea is that what we have created is sufficient in a general or in a human term, and what does coming to backstage or performance remind us of? Weekly meetings with the whole team. Exactly. This is definitely meant, and I had mentioned this, and Tahirih or Amelia had mentioned this at the beginning. when we do this as with ARCs, we touch base with the creative team before we go into the rehearsal room, so that they know that they're involved in this, as they're just as important. And that includes the all the new members that are added later on in the process, the production, the technicians, everybody else that hadn't had the opportunity to be involved on that first day if they hadn't. If there is room in the development process for listing things that you want to avoid in the room. Oh, is there room in the development process for listing things that you want to avoid in the room?
I'll pipe in because I answered that in the chat, that I think, as per the Sarah Polly quotation that we included on an earlier slide, where she talks about how talking about what we want to build was so energizing. I similarly feel that prioritizing what you do want to strive for will be more fruitful.
And I think you kind of mentioned that when you were creating your values. Somebody in your group had said, we're not trying to avoid judgment. What is the thing we're trying to work towards? So yeah, absolutely. Jane, just before doing something that you know is going to be stressful, say a first stumble through, take a moment to revisit the values then, rather than always doing it at the same time. Or perhaps after coming through something stressful, referring back to it then. Did we miss something? Yeah, that's great. I think that, again, making sure that the importance is on the humans or the artists, and really taking the point to go, are we making sure to prioritize this, even though we are entering something, or we've just left something that did take a lot in, or that was very, very stressful. Would be great to take a few minutes off the top of each week to read them together and give space to revise if necessary, to really identify that it's a living document. That's really great. And the idea, again, as Amelia said, the idea is what we're working to go over again, is that condensed version of the main points of what we were talking about. For example, the communication or the authenticity being valued. Yes, thank you so much, Shane. You're speaking as a director. Thank you. Perhaps Not in Our Space is the companion piece that addresses what is not acceptable. It is quite clearly outlined within that. Nicole, I really like the idea of having a way to bring the community room agreement to backstage, tech, performance. I know many emerging artists who experience difficulty with this transition. I think a version for that time could really enforce safety, trauma-informed lenses. Yeah, that's very, very good. Thank you so much. Question from Sean: are room agreements currently being used widely, and are they being used for light comedies as well as heavier pieces? Our suggestion is that they should be for all pieces. I think that, and we'll kind of get into a little bit more details later in our presentation, but every piece, regardless of how light or heavy it is, has some kind of heat, and maybe to one person that that gritty part of the production doesn't ignite something in them, but for somebody else it could. So I think that with that fact, because we're approaching this as artists, not necessarily based on the art, but based on the artist, doing this no matter what the art that you are creating is important. Just want to make sure, am I good for time? Or
sorry, I just wanted to point out that because people were talking about bringing this room agreement into tech spaces and into the theater, and I just wanted to point out that Dave Ball did lead a process in which the technical team of a theater went through one of these processes, and then the artists in the room, the actors, went through a separate process, and then there was another, and then they were brought together, and that was really interesting and revealing, because from those different perspectives, they were able to have an agreement all together. really interesting.
Great, thank you.
And the ideal scenario is that the crew would be present on the first day to be a part of this.
Yeah.
However, often budgetary and time constraints prevent that. So it is the duty then of the ARC's facilitators to facilitate the creation of a room agreement with the crew as well, so that, as you say, they're not excluded from this part. And what was really revealing about when we did this in two separate instances was this image of the crew. It's their house, and the acting company or this whatever specific show is a visitor to the house. So it's also really nice to know what the values of your hosts are.
Just to continue on a little bit, Ellen said, I like the idea of review at specific points in the process. I think a well-timed review can help avoid the feeling of ritual around the review. Exactly, I think so. Yeah, not making it a symbol, but actual thing. Kira, I teach at York U, and the Department of Theatre and Performance is facilitating room agreements with all performance classes at least. So graduating students hopefully are familiar with them as they enter the workforce. And the idea behind creating a room agreement, or especially this zeitgeist of it, and that hopefully continues on, is that we're all going to have the vocabulary to enter a space and have this. So being able to, as more and more people do this room agreement, and as more and more people facilitate it, it'll become smoother. So even the jumbled part of synthesizing all of what we've created, there's going to be some kind of shared vernacular of, oh yes, I recognize these themes from a previous performance that I've done, or previous artwork that I've worked on. I noticed Valerie has raised their hand. Valerie, feel free to speak.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to reiterate what I meant by the whole team. So, for example, for everybody's edification, at Theatre Calgary for the last year and a half, they've implemented group meetings, which start on day one with the first day talk, which is followed by a room agreement. And then every week on the schedule, on a Tuesday, we meet and say, how did the week go? And that's with the whole team.
That's great.
Designers, everything, which then makes it really fosters not in our space where everyone is responsible for this room agreement. So there's not a separation when you go downstairs or wherever into the theater. That's just a continuation. And that room agreement is brought downstairs and then added to. But it's the weekly check-ins about, are we following these principles? Are we not? Have we overstepped? Have we had any abuse of that? And can we talk about it now in the moment if we need to?
That's great. Thank you so much for clarifying. And again, the fact that it's everybody together in the community. I think that's the thing that really highlights or equalizes the power, not having just one-on-one meetings, although there are definitely places and times for that. I think we will move forward now to Amelia.
Thank you. And yes, just to affirm that certainly the container matters. So whatever's happening in the rehearsal hall will only be amplified and supported if the housing institution, the producer, also is on board with those values and can co-sign the room agreement, if you will. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to start us off in a conversation around the challenges, what can be the challenges to maintaining the room agreement. And this is pretty specific to actors. So I hope you'll be on board for this digression, but it's relevant to anyone who's involved in the process of making a show. And I want to speak briefly about a groundbreaking MRI study that was conducted in 2019 at McMaster University by Dr. Stephen Brown, who is the Associate Professor or Unassociate Professor of Psychology, Neuroscience, and Behavior at McMaster, as well as the Director of the NeuroArts Lab. And he put university-trained actors through the MRI and asked them a series of questions as themselves, then gave them time to warm up and asked them a series of questions in character. They were fourth-year students rehearsing Romeo and Juliet. And the findings of this MRI study suggest that when we adopt a fictional first-person perspective, i.e. when we're saying I, but we mean Juliet or Romeo or Tybalt or Mercutio, the parts of the brain that control awareness of self and awareness of embodied self both deactivate. So neurologically speaking, acting is a deactivation-driven process, perhaps representing a loss of self. I first got wind of this study in an interview that Dr. Stephen Brown did on Quirks and Quarks. This is pulled from that interview. He said, I do see acting, at least in part, as being a kind of zero-sum game where there's just one of you to go around, and the more you become someone else, the less there is of you. And this is worth mentioning in the context of room agreements and our ability to uphold them, because when, in fact and fiction blur when art starts to imitate life, and yes, absolutely, we'll include at a later date all of these slides, and we'll have a works cited there that will link to both the Quirks and Quarks interview and also I can send you the study itself. I tried to read it, but the takeaways are that this mythology we have around getting lost in the character is actually supported now by the latest neuroscience, and certainly too as we learn more about neuroplasticity. If you're in a role for a long time, as you might be at a festival or for a long-term shoot, you're just wearing these grooves of another person's thoughts and feelings in your plastic brain, and it does have a real effect. So just saying that out loud and just knowing that it can happen and that it's actually a legitimate occupational hazard rather than something to, oh, thank you, Jane, there it is. Yeah, you're creating new neural pathways. So it's not something to shame one another for. There's this sort of bizarre idea, although I see it being deconstructed, that like you can leave behind in the rehearsal hall whatever happened there, but we have to acknowledge the bleed. Similarly, one of the values that showed up in the room agreement we just tried to work on was that I can fold in my experiences into the work. So there is this sort of reciprocity happening there, and being accountable for ourselves when it's happening and we can recognize it happening, but also the grace for when we don't see that it's happening and it is happening. It can make it hard to be the model room agreement student when we're getting lost in the content that we're doing. And how do we support one another through that? And now over to Tahirih.
Thank you, Amelia, for all of that. This part is really, we're kind of going into the information download, and I apologize because we are probably running a bit short on time, so we will do our best to convey the information we have prepared for you. I'm just going to switch this slide here. I will be doing double duty as I speak. So another challenge to maintaining these values is conflict. Conflict is an inescapable part of the human journey and the collaborative process, yet we have so few words to describe it and so few tools to manage it. Now, this is the part of the informative portion of ARCS, and we usually begin with this, where we try to get a better understanding of how conflict generates and escalates, so we can recognize where we might be at on that ladder in order to redirect those energies towards the fertile ground where ideas, opinions, and wills collide and creation and invention occurs. So conflict is a situation in which one or more of our 5 core needs are unmet, threatened, or perceived to be threatened in multiple people, causing them to believe that their interests and goals are incompatible. It escalates along a predictable 5-step pattern. And when we are in these stages of conflict, we are capable of causing unintentional harm. So in the sequence of intent, action, and effect, we know that only the actionable is knowable. Intent is unknowable unless it's stated, and effect is likewise unknowable unless it's expressed. We can transform conflict when we avoid making assumptions about intent or effect, and instead invoke radical curiosity and ask questions to bring the invisible phenomenon of intent and effect to light. So a working knowledge of this pattern to point yourself to where you are on the ladder is the first step in self-correcting and getting you and your team back to a healthier stage. So this material that we're going to go through quickly, hopefully not too quickly, came to us via Richard Lamb and sourced through his conflict management training through the University of Waterloo. So in the 5 stages of conflict, our stage 1 is disagreement. Now, disagreement is not an unhealthy stage in which to be in. Differences are procedural or substantive. They are not about needs being unmet or perceived character flaws, but they are about differing opinions about choices, ideas, or ways forward. Trust is still strong, and the parties are engaged, seeking to hear and understand each other, wanting to collaborate to seek the greater good. In this stage, the problem is the problem. Stage 2 in the 5 stages of conflict is us versus them. It is conflict, us versus them, where we begin to transfer frustration with the problem onto the people around us. So this is where we start to make up stories about how or why we are right or better or good, and why they are wrong or bad or worse. So we perceive the person's character as the problem and not the problem itself. So we gather evidence in support of our version of the story, even going back in time to confirm our bias. So differences in opinion on how to proceed awaken these unmet core needs. So this is where the person becomes the problem, where we perceive the person is the problem. The 3rd stage in the stages of conflict is triangulation. Now, this is where we start to recruit other people to our side of the disagreement, where we start to create camps or different factions. So parties with unmet needs feel vulnerable, so they draw in third parties to bolster the stories that they're making up about the other. We're very good at storytelling within the realm of theater making. So you agree with me, right? They are the problem. The 4th stage within the 5 stages of conflict is the tipping point. So here, this is where our fight or flight kicks in, our self-preservation at all costs. So hostile and mutually escalating behavior occurs to humiliate, punish, or harm the other. So assumptions and creative narratives justify harmful actions, and new disputes emerge that create leaders and alliances. So we start to justify behavior that would be unthinkable under normal circumstances. And we tell ourselves that harm we do is justified because of the situation we find ourselves in, while harm done by the other is an inherent trait of their character. So resolution now, at this stage, starts to be perceived as a betrayal of the self. So here in the stage of the tipping point, we start to see that we identify so personally with it that being right is more important than actually solving the problem itself. Now, stage 5 is entrenchment, and this is a like difficult stage to recover from. So at this stage, there is a change in the social structure of the group with a goal of excluding the other. New disputes are limited, but memories of the old disputes are repeated and rehearsed. Withdrawing from the conflict is tied to your value as a person, so continuing to fight is the only choice. So relationships may never recover at this point, and it's unlikely the conflicting parties will want to work together again. So this idea that losing is not an option and we will never find a resolution. It can seem very hard to get out of that stage of entrenchment. And maybe you've heard like phrases of like, oh, that person never works with that person. And so often they're already at a level of entrenchment where conflict is so deep. So conflict arises when one of our 5 core needs are unmet or unexpressed, or when we perceive a threat to one or more of these needs. So we're going to go over these different 5 needs that we all have that are inherent. So the first need is security. That is our need for physical safety and well-being. The second stage, or the second core need, is recognition. So that's our need to have our skills and our accomplishments recognized by the group that we are in. Belonging is our need to feel that we are a part of a group or welcome in it. Oh, I have to click the slide. There we go. Number 4 is self-determination, and that's our need to feel that we are in control of our actions and that we have agency in our lives. And then the 5th core need is our need is meaning. It's our need to engage in pursuits that we feel are meaningful and that our need to have a sense of purpose in our lives. So if the genesis of conflict is the story that we are making up about people rather than about the problem itself, then we as professional storytellers are inherently qualified to also reframe conflicts by rewriting the stories we're telling ourselves. So you find yourself along any path of the 5 stages of conflict, and often the first stage of conflict of disagreement is an okay place to be in, because that is when we are working towards resolving the problem in and of itself. It's as we start to filter down into the other stages that it becomes harder and harder to bring ourselves out of those stages, especially when we get to entrenchment. I'm going to hand it over. So that's a lot of dense information that we tend to spend a bit more time on unpacking when we go through this portion and running arcs. But I'm hoping that even just this information is sparking in you the ability to reflect back and understand or see new conflict or situations that you might find yourself in with a new light and a new lens to kind of understand. We're going to link this into tools that will now allow you to transform conflict when you're in it.
So if you're like me, going through that presentation of the 5 stages of conflict reminds me of pretty much every conflict I've ever had in my life. And the various levels bring back so many memories. So what do we do with all of that? This is a way to synthesize all of that information that we just had. So the effect or intent, action, effect, where action is knowable, but intent and effect are unknowable unless explicitly communicated. The 5 stages of conflict and the 5 core needs. What do we do with that? What do we do with that? The invoking radical curiosity and recasting others in your mind as capable of growth and learning is part of what we need in order to transform conflict. So here are some tools for you to help with that. And the first thing is a self-assessment. If you're experiencing conflict, take stock of which of the 5 needs security, recognition, belonging, self-determination, meaning is unmet in you. So for example, I'm backstage and I keep tripping over someone's shoes. That is an unmet need for security. Then the second stage is to determine who has the power to transform that conflict. Is that something that I can take care of on my own to fulfill those unmet needs? Or do I need to set up a conversation with someone else? Or, so for example, those aren't my shoes, they belong to another cast member. Or do we need to notify a third party to engage their help? So for example, we might also pull in a stage manager to help facilitate that conversation. So we meet that unmet need by finding out a safe place to put those shoes for everyone. Another tool for transforming conflict is something we call de-esc. And this stands for, it's an acronym. And sometimes it's impossible to articulate the complexity of your own emotional experience in the moment of conflict. So it's helpful to set up a conversation at a later date when maybe feelings are a little bit more, tempers have calmed down a little bit, or if some more clarity has appeared. So you can set up a conversation at a later date with the party. And here are some tools to help with that conversation. So if you remember that in the sequence of intent, action, and effect, only action is visible. So intention is invisible unless it's stated, and effect is likewise invisible unless it's expressed. And we can transform that conflict when we don't make assumptions about the intent or effect, but rather ask questions to bring those invisible portions to make them visible. Again, avoid the temptation to write a story about the other person's character. Recast them in the story you're telling yourself as someone capable of growth, learning, and changed behavior. So de-esc stands for describe. Describe the action as you experienced it. I felt unsafe, and this is what happened. Express the effect it had on you, and leave space for the other to express their intent. So this is where we try to bring to light those pieces of intent and effect that aren't necessarily known. Specify which of the 5 core needs is unmet. This deals with safety. This deals with my sense of belonging. This deals with my sense of meaning. And then at the end of that, clarify the change in behavior required to prevent harm from recurring, and how that change will benefit the individual and the group. So hopefully at this point, the problem is still the problem, and we can just deal with the problem as a problem and not make other people part of that problem. If you're on the receiving end of a de-esc convo, these are some things that you can practice, and they are the triple A's of accountability. Accountability came up a lot in our values today. So first was accepting that your action, words, or behavior caused harm. I understand that my actions caused you harm. Second is to make an apology, making a heartfelt statement of apology for your actions. I am so sorry for the harm I caused and the way my words and actions made you feel. Of course, this needs to be genuine and heartfelt. And the third A is adjusting, either one-on-one or as a group. Discuss a strategy for not repeating the harm. In the future, I will do blank differently so that this harm is not repeated and we can move forward in good faith. And finally, if you are the person who set up the conversation and you feel like you've been heard and have received a sincere apology, there's a fourth A here, which is accepting and creating a space to accept the apology. I accept your apology and I'm ready to move forward in good faith. So together, we're striving to make a paradigm shift from the binary experience of harmed and harm causing, or victim and perpetrator of harm, to a collective responsibility to transform conflict. And hopefully these steps, the idea is that we are able to address conflicts earlier on in the 5 stages of conflict, well before they get to entrenchment, where there's very, very little chance of changing that. But if we can catch ourselves and change behavior at the very first or second or third level of conflict, then the hope is that we can move forward and get on the same page to move forward together. Amelia?
With the 5 remaining minutes, we'll just say thank you very much. And many of the questions we had in advance were about ensuring the agreement is not used by a person for their own benefit, a protocol set up in advance for what happens for when the room agreement is violated. How do you navigate a member of leadership behaving in a way that violates the recipe or agreed upon values? And although we sort of had to cram it in at the end there, it is building this same vocabulary around the stages of conflict, the 5 unmet needs, and some of these tools for transforming conflict that actually give a lot of muscle to reinforce the community agreement. So in some ways, it's the yin to the yang of it. It's the necessary second part of it is beginning to cultivate this shared language around, okay, when there's a conflict, here's how we identify it and here's how we can approach it. And that's okay, and that it's normal, and that it's inevitable, and that we actually have the tools to do these hard things. We invite you to consider something from today that you might take forward into your practice. We thank you so much for your time and patience, and particularly for your participation. We know that was a bit different from the other workshops, but we're so grateful that we were able to get in the muck of it with all of you. And if you have any further questions, please email us at arcs@tift.ca. We would be happy to keep the conversation going. And we will also be sending you a PDF version of these slides with the works cited page to link you to everything we referenced today. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thanks to Amelia, Tahirih, Derek, and Giovanni, and all of our participants.
Tahirih.
Tahirih, sorry. I was rehearsing it. I rehearsed it wrong. Tahirih, Derek, Giovanni, Amelia, ASL interpreters, and all of our participants. It was really great to share in this space and learning with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.